Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice radio. So today, we are looking at a new Prism Star. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Lance Prism Star has finally been revealed in one of those YouTube videos Japan likes to do when they reveal these cards. And we know what it does. And actually, I'm willing to go out and say that it is the best Prism Star supporter we've had yet. Although, to be fair, we've only had Cyrus and Lysander, so the competition isn't amazing yet. Of course, we knew this was coming. We did do a video a little while ago looking at the set list from Dragonstorm, looking at the fact that we were going to have two new Prism Stars. We were going to have Victini. We were going to have Lance. Still no word on what Victini does, but we know what Lance does. Our translation comes from the lovely Rappelman TCG, Mr. David Hochmann himself. And it reads that if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn, you can search your deck for up to 2 Dragon Pokemon and put them onto your bench. And when I say Dragon Pokemon, I mean Dragon Pokemon. I do not mean basic Dragon Pokemon. That means that this works very much like Archie's Ace in the Hole or Maxie's Hidden Ball Trick, with 2 massively brilliant exceptions. No, wait. 3 massively brilliant exceptions. Massively brilliant exception number 1, you get 2 Pokemon rather than 1. Massively brilliant exception number 2, you are searching your deck, not your discard, that's easier. Massively brilliant exception number 3, it is far easier to have a Pokemon knocked out than it is to get your hand down to 0 cards, and that's most of the time anyway, so this is going to be easier to use. This is an absolutely brilliant card. Now, a couple quick ruling things we do need to confirm here. It is any KO during your opponent's last turn. So if your opponent were to take a KO using an ability, say Decidueye's Feather Arrow, probably your classic example, that would count. Doesn't have to be a KO from an attack. But if your opponent KO'd your Pokemon with something like Poison or Burn, that happens between turns, which means you didn't have a Pokemon KO during your opponent's last turn, which means this would not work, just like we see with teammates. There we go. Hope that is nice and clear. Now, we also need to remember that this is a Prism Star card, which means you can only have 1 in your deck, and when it is discarded, it goes straight to the lost zone and can never be reused. There is no using Pal Pad to shuffle it in and use it later on in the game. There is no using Lucamine to get it back. There is no using Puzzle of Time to get it back. Once it's used, it's gone. You cannot have it back. And whether that's you've used it to actually have the effect, or whether you've just had to discard it early game with a Professor Sycamore, as soon as it hits the discard pile, it is gone forever into the lost zone. And we've never had a mechanic that says you can get a card back from the lost zone, and we shouldn't ever do, and I hope we never do, because that will be dumb given that it is the lost zone. Thing to remember is, even though it's only 1 and you can only play 1 in your deck, we've got Tapu Lele nowadays, you can use Wonder Tag to search it out, so even though you're only playing 1 copy of it in your deck, it's not going to be the most difficult thing ever to find. And we're going to mention Zinnia again in a minute. That's another really good supporter that helps out these Dragon Pokemon. But we need to say the same thing here that we did then. This is a supporter card, but it's not drawing you any cards. Now, it's getting a couple of Pokemon out, and that is wonderful. But the problem we have here is you're not actually drawing any cards. This is your 1 supporter for the turn. So when you're relying on a card like this, you really need to be using something like Octillery, something like Zoroark, maybe even something like Oranguru. Although, to be fair, that does only draw until you've got 3 cards in hand. It's not amazing. Although a lot of people use it, it can be grabbed turn 1 with Bridget. It's certainly not a bad card, because you don't get to get any energy unless you've already got it in your hand when you're using Lance Prism Star. And you don't get to get your other evolutions. There's a whole bunch of Pokemon you may want to get, or energy or whatever. When you use your only supporter for the turn, that means you're not drawing other cards. So if you're building a deck around stuff like Zinnia and Lance, which you may well be, if you're playing a Dragon deck, that's fine. But if you're using your supporters to do things that aren't drawing cards, you need to find stuff that aren't supporters to do stuff like drawing cards. Now, of course, with any supporter like this, we do need to talk about uses for it, and honestly, I think there is one card above all else that really shows how redonkulous this can be, and it's Dragonite GX. Now, this hasn't been released. This is coming in Dragonstorm, and Dragonite is kind of the signature Pokemon of Lance, so it all does make sense. It all does fit together beautifully in the lore of the Pokemon world. But Dragonite's a Stage 2. And it's a really good Pokemon. I did a video, I'll pop a link in the description. 70 for 1 lightning energy, 200 for 4 energy. But you can use Zinnia, and you can use double colorless energy, and in expanded, you can use double dragon energy. It's a very good card. But it's a Stage 2. Well, the good news is you can actually use Dragonite and Lance together to go a little bit silly and over the top. So what you do is you have a Pokemon knocked out, and then you go, okay, let's go and search my deck for 2 Dragonites. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. You don't need to have any Dratinis, any Dragonairs. You go straight into your deck and grab yourself 2 Dragonites. Now, this is a once per game supporter, which means that you can only do this once. Well, that's 2 Dragonites. What are you going to do in terms of getting your other Dragonites out? Well, don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. I have got a plan for that as well. And the plan for getting your other Dragonites is Dragonite. You see, Dragonite's GX attack for free colorless energy, and yes, once again, you can use double colorless energy, says put free dragon Pokemon from your discard pile onto your bench. So what you do is you rock with your first 2 Dragonite that you got with Lance. Then when you've got those 2 and another Dragonite in the discard pile, you use Dragon Porter GX. Then all of a sudden you've got 3 more Dragonite, and you've managed to get 5 Dragonite in one game without ever having to use a rare candy, and more than that, without ever having to do that evolving thing. You don't actually need to play Dratini in your deck in order to use Dragonite. Now, that leads us on to 2 important points. Important point number 1, you can only play 1 of these in your deck. Playing 0 Dratini is incredibly risky. I don't necessarily recommend it, but if you do, make sure you play Gladion, because if your Lance Prism Star is prize, you are going to need to get it out. You are going to need to play Lance Prism Star. That gets you the first 2 Dragonite, and then, of course, from there, you use Dragonite to get you the next 3, 5 in total, and you only really need 3 Dragonites. If 3 Dragonite go down, you lose the game. As a quick side note, feel free to use Max Elixir with Dragonite, but whatever you do, don't use Ace Roller. You might not have evolved these up regularly, and that's fine, but if you pick them up with Ace Roller, you can't just play them down again like you could something like a basic Pokemon. No, ladies and gentlemen, stay away from Ace Roller. But the other thing this means is you leave all your Dragonite in your deck, and then you focus on your starting Pokemon. Maybe it's a Tapu Koko. Free retreat, spreading damage, double colorless energy, that's nice. Maybe it's an Alolan Vulpix to search yourself out some Pokemon. Maybe some Dragonite to discard, or whatever. Maybe it's one of these many Pokemon like Volcanion that do a little bit of damage while spreading energy around. You can play fewer basic Pokemon to guarantee that you start with a Pokemon you want, because you're not having to muck about with Dratini. I'm not saying you should play a 0 Dratini Dragonite deck. I am saying that Lance Prism Star combined with a GX attack means that it's an option, and that in and of itself is firstly nuts, and secondly it shows how good Lance Prism Star can be. This is only one example. Any evolving dragon Pokemon at all that looks even remotely good becomes instantly better because of Lance Prism Star. Although I still don't think that this is enough to make Como OGX viable, Como OGX is really bad. And Dragonstorm now, I mean, confirmed, it is basically a set where Pokemon are just going, please play dragons. Please just play some dragon Pokemon. We've got Zinnia, which accelerates energy. We've got Altaria, which means your dragon Pokemon do more damage. We've got Dragon Claw, which means your opponent takes 3 damage counters when they attack it, if it's attached to a dragon Pokemon. We've got Dragonite that's really good. Now we've got Lance Prism Star. All these dragon cards to which I'm referring, I will put links in the description so you can learn more about them if you wish. Dragonstorm is clearly a set focused on dragon Pokemon, and I think Lance Prism Star is absolutely, by a fair distance, the best of these Prism Star supporter cards that we've had revealed so far. I think both Lysander and Cyrus can be good, but I think they are nothing compared to Lance. I think it's an instant inclusion in any Dragon deck, but we are still left with the question of whether we have Dragon Pokemon that are good enough to actually play, and I don't know if we have them at the moment. I love Dragonite, but it might be just a little bit too gimmicky. Either way, I am giving Lance Prism Star between 4 and 5 Wassies. It's a great card, but I don't know if we will ever get the cards that will take advantage of it. But it's one of those cards, the only way it'll ever not be great is if we don't get the right cards to abuse it with. Either way, it is a good card. But maybe you disagree with me, or maybe you can think of some great Dragon Pokemon that would go brilliantly with Lance Prism Star. Great news! There's a comment section. Chuck your ideas down there. Go nuts! But be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and so on, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, and do check out Wassie Plays. We started covering Dragon Ball Super, and it's a lot of fun. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.